Hello and welcome back, students. We are into the fifth video lecture of the video lecture series made on the subject of renewable energy technology, whose subject code is ME 409, and the topic which we are going to discuss today is the energy efficiency and energy conservation. I am Shri Krishna Mishra, Assistant Professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, Suresh Gyan Vihar University, Jaipur. So before starting our today's lecture, let's first of all see what are the objectives of the lecture. So these are the objectives of today's lecture. First, we are going to understand about the energy conservation, its importance and its need at the present scenario. Then the second lecture objective is to know about the importance of energy efficient devices. As you all see that nowadays all the appliances which are there in the market, they have got a tag of energy rating. So why that is important and why it has came into existence, we will see. So now coming into the third objective, we are going to understand about the energy security. And then also at last our objective will be to understand about energy efficiency. See, energy conservation and energy efficiency are both interrelated terms. If we talk about energy conservation, then without focusing on energy efficient devices, we can't attain the goal of energy conservation. Because if, for example, for any particular purpose, we were using more energy, that for the same purpose if we are using less energy, then it itself means that we are conserving the energy, we are reducing the wastage of energy. So energy conservation and energy efficiency are more or less interrelated terms with each other. So we are going to discuss on these. One more thing that before we starting the lecture I want to tell to you is that you all have seen that let's take an example of bulb. In the previous days we used to have a bulb which used to consume a lot of energy. Then came the CFLs and now we are having the LEDs which are very energy efficient. So you can see that how increasingly, how at a very fast rate we are moving towards energy efficient devices. There is a star rating in all the devices which we see at nowadays. Fridge, TV, washing machine, CFLs means your bulbs, tube lights, even the fans all come with a energy tag. How much energy consumption it take, it is all clearly written on that. So therefore this is particular thing is important, and therefore today's lecture is also important. So without wasting more time, let's start our today's lecture. I was telling you about the energy security. So basically this is the import of oil and coal which we do, and which is increasing at a very faster rate. As per the requirement in 2006, the import of gas and LNG, liquefied natural gas, are likely to increase in the coming years. And we have seen that we are in 2021, and this is the old record, and we can see that it has increased to many folds, import of gas and liquefied natural gas. This energy import dependence implies vulnerability to external price shocks and supply fluctuations, which threaten the energy security of the country. So you can understand that energy security of the country is in danger. Why it is in danger? Because generally we are dependent of import of oil, coal and gas, and which import is also increasing very fastly. And this energy import, we all know they are they are susceptible to, they are vulnerable to energy external price shocks and supply fluctuations. They are vulnerable to external price shocks and supply fluctuations. Therefore, the country's energy security that has also to be improved now. We cannot be over dependent on importing the energy sources. Now, increasing dependence on oil imports means reliance on import from the Middle East. Middle East is a region which is susceptible to disturbances and consequent disruption of oil supplies. This calls for diversification of sources of oil imports. The need to deal with oil price fluctuations also necessitates measures to be taken to reduce the oil dependence of the economy. Now, the need to deal with oil price fluctuation, this has also necessitated the measures to be taken to reduce the oil dependence of economy, possible through physical measures to reduce demand and by developing alternative source to oil such as natural gas and renewable energy such as natural gas and renewable energy. So the need to deal with oil price fluctuations also has increased measures that has to be taken to reduce the oil dependence of the economy, possibly 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 through physical measures to reduce the demand and by developing alternatives to oil such as natural gas and renewable energy. Then after there are different strategies that can be used to meet future challenges to their energy security. What are the strategies which we can frame in order to get energy security? First is building stockpiles. Means we can if we see the oil prices are very high, then we should stock we should create stockpiles of energy. Then the second is diversification of energy supply sources. Means we should not be dependent on a particular source of energy. Means we should remove our over dependence on fossil fuels. It should not be like that. The energy source is only one, and that is through fossil fuels. Alternate sources like solar, wind, hydro. These all should be their capacity should now be increased so that the over dependence on a particular type of fuel can be removed. Then comes increased capacity of fuel switching. This is the third strategy which we can follow. First is building stockpiles, second is diversification of energy supplies, third is increased capacity of fuel switching, and fourth is demand restraint, means we should reduce the demand also. Fourth is development of renewable energy sources. We should develop new sources of renewable energy. Then energy efficiency. This is also a strategy. And the last is sustainable development. So, however, out of all these options, the simplest and the most easily attainable option is reducing demand through persistent energy conservation effort. So, one more effort which we can do, which is the easiest and the simplest, is to reduce the demand of these source energies. Reduce the demand of energy. How we can reduce the demand of energy? By energy conservation efforts. By the conservation of energy efforts, we can reduce our demand of energy. So now let's focus on energy conservation. Energy conservation is very important because if we will not do energy conservation, if we will not conserve energy, then we will need too much energy, and this need of too much energy will finally create burden on the sources of energy which we are currently having. So energy conservation is the first step to of energy security. Means we can reduce our demand of energy so that demand and supply can be matched with each other. So energy conservation and energy efficiency are separable, but they both are interrelated concept. Energy conservation and energy efficiency, they both are interrelated concepts. Energy conservation is achieved when growth of energy consumption is reduced, and this is measured in physical terms. Energy conservation is measured when growth of energy consumption is reduced, and this is measured in physical terms. Energy conservation can therefore be the result of several processes or developments, such as productivity increase or technological process. Energy conservation can be the result of several processes or developments such as productivity increase or technological process. On the other hand, energy efficiency is achieved when energy intensity is a specific product. In a specific product, process or area of production or consumption is reduced without affecting output. So, energy efficiency can be achieved when energy intensity is a specific product, process, or area of production or consumption is reduced without affecting output, consumption, or comfort levels. The last point is that the promotion of energy efficiency will contribute to energy conservation and is therefore an integral part of energy conservation promotional policies. Now let's see. It provides, as you can see in the diagram also, energy efficiency means using less energy to perform the same function. Energy conservation and energy efficiency, they both are interrelated. How they are interrelated? As we all know that if we will use less energy for performing the same function, this means that our products are very efficient, so we can increase the efficiency of our product which are using the energy, like the bulbs which are used to light. So the bulb, if we use some bulbs which uses less amount of energy to do the same work of providing the light, then our bulb can be called as energy efficient. So therefore you see that nowadays we don't use the old fashioned bulb which used to consume a lot of energy. The incandescent bulb which we used previously, they used to consume 60 watt of electricity, but nowadays we use LED, not even the. Nowadays, what we do, we use the CFLs, LED bulbs. These are used nowadays. Even the CFLs are now obsolete. We use the LED bulb. Why we have done this? Because technology we have tried to increase in such a way that for that same amount of for the same amount of light, we don't have to consume a lot of energy. All right. So, just a minute. Hello? So it provides additional economic value by preserving the resource base and reducing the pollution. For example, replacing traditional light bulbs, which we have seen that now the light bulbs which we were using traditionally, they have been replaced by compact CFLs, compact fluorescent lamp. CFL. What is the full form of CFL? Compact fluorescent lamp. Compact fluorescent lamp. All right. So CFLs, and which take only one-fourth of the energy to lit the same room. In previously, if it was 60, then traditional bulbs used 60 watt, and the CFL used 15 watt for the same amount of light. Post pollution levels are also reduced by the same amount. Even the pollution, that is also reduced by the same amount. If I talk about the Amazon, the traditional bulb used to emit CO of 65 G per hour, and now it is with the use of CFL we are emitting only 16. So this is the pollution level which has also got decreased. So this is what? This is basically your energy efficiency. This is known as what? This is your energy efficiency. So energy conservation, for energy conservation, you will have to use the product which are very much energy efficient. So both we can say are interrelated to each other. Energy conservation is only possible by using the very efficient, energy efficient products. Now, what is the energy strategy for the future? The energy strategy for future may be classified into immediate, medium, and long-term strategy. So, what is the strategy? Now we are discussing about the different strategies we can frame, we can frame in order to achieve that goal of energy security. So, what are the different strategies? Now, the strategies can be divided, students, into three terms. These are into three categories. What are the three categories? These, first of all, categories are made on the basis of the duration. If the strategies are made in order to bear the immediate results, that they are known as immediate term strategy. Now, if the strategies are made in order to get the result of those strategies in after a long time, then they are known as a long-term strategy. A medium-term strategy will give you result of those steps or strategies after a medium duration of time. So if I talk you about the immediate term strategy, then comes your rationalizing the tariff structure of various energy products. First of all, what we will have to do immediately if you want the result, then first it will be that you will have to rationalize. This is for the government that they should rationalize the tariff structure of different type of energy products. Then second is the optimum utilization of existing assets. Whatever assets which we are having, we should utilize them optimally. We should optimally utilize them. There should be optimum utilization of energy assets. Then efficiency in production system. Third strategy in immediate term strategy is efficiency in production systems and reduction in distribution losses, including those in traditional energy sources. Third is what? Third is efficiency in production system, and fourth is what? Fourth is distribution in reduction in distributed systems, including those in traditional energy sources. Fourth is promoting research and development. Fourth is promoting research and development, transfer and use of technologies and practice for environmentally sound energy systems, including new and renewable energy sources. All right, so these are the steps. I hope you are understanding this immediate terms which can be taken in order to promote energy strategy. Then there are medium term strategy also. What are medium term strategy? The demand management through greater conservation of energy, optimum fuel mix, structural changes in the economy, an appropriate model mix in the transport sector, that is greater dependence on rail than on road for movement of goods and passenger, and shift away from private modes to public modes for passenger. Now, this is the medium term strategy. In this, the mode of transportation should be more of rail than on road, and also the buses should be promoted, public buses instead of private vehicles for every individual. They should be promoted. Changes in design of different products to reduce the material intensity of those products should also be promoted. Now, their strategy is to need to shift to less energy intensive mode of transport. What are the less energy intensive mode of transport? Now, this will include measures to improve the transport infrastructures like roads, better design of vehicles, and use of CNG and synthetic fuel. Similarly, better urban planning would also reduce the demand for energy use in transport sector. So the second thing is that we should shift to energy intensive mode of transport. Means we should have better roads, we should have better design of vehicles which consume less energy, and you should use vehicles which uses fuel like CNG or the synthetic fuel, syn fuel. Now there is third is that there is need to move away from renewable. There is need to move away from renewable, non-renewable to renewable energy sources like solar, wind, biomass, etc. They should be promoted. If I talk you about the long-term strategy, students, so energy generation of energy resources, efficient generation of energy resources. In this comes the efficient production of coal, oil, and natural gas, reduction of natural gas flaring, improving the energy infrastructure like building new refineries, creation of urban gas transmission and distribution network, maximizing efficiency of rail transport of coal production, building new coal and gas-fired power station, improving energy efficiency in accordance with national economic and environmental priorities. And next one is promoting of energy efficiency and emission standards. And the last is labeling programs for products and adoption of energy efficient technologies in large industries. So these were the long-term strategies. Now let's discuss about the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which in short is known as BEE. What is this BEE? See, first of all, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency was established by the Government of India, and the mission of Bureau of Energy Efficiency was, and it should not be said as was because it is presently also active, the mission of Bureau of Energy Efficiency is to institutionalize energy efficient services and enable delivery mechanisms in the country and provide leadership to energy efficiency in all the sectors of the economy. So the primary objective is to reduce energy intensity in the Indian economy. So we can say that basic purpose of when this Bureau of Energy Efficiency BEE came into existence, the basic purpose was to start a delivery mechanism in the whole of the country to initiate energy efficient services and also to provide a leadership to energy efficiency in every sector of the economy. Now, the second thing that is important is the General Superintendent's directions and management of the affairs of the Bureau is whole soul on the hands of the Government Council. This Government Council has 26 members. Alright, so the council is headed by the Union Minister of Power, and consists of members which are represented by secretaries of various line ministries, the CEO of technical agencies under the ministries, the members representing equipment and appliances manufacturers. So you can see that the council, though it is headed by the Union Minister of Power and it consists of members, and now who are the members? The members are the secretaries of various line ministries, CEOs of technical agencies under the ministries, members representing equipment and appliances manufacturers. Apart from that, industry, architects, consumers, and 5 power regions representing the states. These are all the members of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency Council. Now, the Director General of the Bureau is also considered as the ex officio member secretary of the Council. Alright, so this was the whole soul we can say about the administration of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Total 26 members. Head is the Union Minister of Power and whole soul power is vested on the Government Council. Alright, then after the BEE, it was at the start when it was established, it was supported by central government by way of grant. The grant was given by the central government in its budget. However, after a period of 5 to 7 years, it became self-sufficient, means it was able to self-run. It was able to run by itself. Alright, and in order, it would be authorized to collect appropriate fee in discharge of its functions assigned to it. And it started collecting fees for performing its function. which were given to it. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency will also use the Central Energy Conservation Fund and other funds raised from various sources for innovative financing of energy efficiency projects in order to promote energy efficient investment. So you can see in this way that basically at the start it was whole soul run by the central government, but after a period of establishment of 5 to 7 years, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency became self-sufficient. And how it became self-sufficient? It started charging the fees for performing its function which was assigned to it. And it also uses the Energy Conservation Fund which is given by the central government, and also it also uses the other funds which are raised from various sources for innovative financing of energy efficiency projects in order to promote energy efficient investment. So this was all about Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Then after, let's discuss about the distributed generation. So what is distributed generation? First of all, we should know about it. Distributed generation, basically in short, is known as DG. In short, we know distributed generation as DG, and it generally refers to a small scale. A small scale means typically we are talking about 1 kilowatt to 50 megawatt. So it typically refers to a small scale electric power generator that produce electricity at a site closer to customer or that are tied to a electric distribution system. So DG are basically small scale units. They are between 1 kilowatt to 50 megawatt capacity, and they are generally installed, they are generally generated, or they are generally installed at a location, at a place which is very close to the end consumers. End consumers means those who are in need of this generated energy, this generated electricity. So basically it is installed in remote areas, we can say, where the electricity supply from the grid is not possible. So in those generation, what we do, we used to install some renewable power plants like the solar power plants, and through those solar power plants the electricity which is generated, it is saved in DGs, distributed generation systems. Alright, and we can also tie such type of plants to electric distribution system also. Now distributed generators include, but it is not limited to synchronous generators, but they include synchronous generators, induction generators, reciprocating engines, micro turbines. In micro turbines comes your combustion turbines that run on high energy fossil fuels such as oil, propane, natural gas, gasoline or diesel also. Then combustion gas turbines, fuel cells also, and some solar photovoltaic and wind turbines. So these all can come under the distributed generators. Alright, synchronous generators, induction generators also, reciprocating engines, micro turbines, gas turbines, fuel cells, solar photovoltaics, and also the wind turbines. It may use any of these things. Then after, now if we discuss about the applications of distributed generating systems, there are many reasons that a customer may choose to install a distributed generator. Now what can be the reasons? DG can be used to generate a customer's entire electricity supply. So even the entire supply of electricity can be done through this distributed generator. Even for peak shaving purposes, peak shaving means generating a portion of a customer's electricity on site to reduce the amount of electricity purchased during peak price periods. Alright, so there is a name for this particular thing, which is the peak shaving. Alright, it is generating a portion of electricity on site to reduce the amount of electricity purchased during the peak price period. And for peak saving, along with the peak saving, DG can be used to generate electricity for standby or emergency generation also. Emergency or standby generation. Now in this situation, in emergency generation means it can be used as a backup to owner's power supply through the grid, and also it can be used as a green power source. Green power source means we can use it for generating the electricity through solar power plant, wind power plant, or any other renewable source which we use. Alright, and also it can be used for increased reliability. So also in some remote locations, DG can be less costly as it eliminates the need for expensive construction of distribution and transmission lines. So you can see, students, that these are all the benefits or advantages we can say of distributed generated system. So what I have told to you first was the peak shaving, means at the peak when the price of electricity is high and demand is high, at that time we can use it. The second is at the emergency situations, we can use it as a backup. We can use it as a green power source because this can make DG can be used for storing the electricity generated through renewable sources, and also therefore it provides increased reliability. One added benefit of installing the distributed generated systems is what it can be used in remote locations, in the far off locations which are far from the cities, in hilly areas, for example, where there is no distribution and transmission lines. So in those hilly areas or in remote areas, this DG systems can be considered to be less costly as compared to installation of construction of distribution and transmission lines. So this is, I hope, clear what is the application of distributed generated system. Then students, let's discuss more on this benefits of distributed generated systems. So distributed generation has a lower capital cost because why? Because of the small size of DG, therefore it has low capital cost. Although the investment cost per kilowatt hour of a DG can be much higher than that of a large power plant. Alright, it may reduce the need for large infrastructure construction or upgrades. Why? Because the DGs can be constructed direct at the load location, and this is one of the plus point benefit. Then comes, if the DG provides power for local use, it may reduce pressure on distribution and transmission lines. If we are using this distributed generation systems for the local purposes, then it can, as I have told to you, it can reduce the burden on distribution lines and the transmission lines. Then with some technologies, zero or near zero pollutant emissions are there over its useful life. Means it is not taking into consideration pollutants emission over the entire product life cycle, that is pollution produced during the manufacturing or after the decommissioning of the DG system. So this is one of the other benefit, that it produces zero pollution or near zero pollutions. Now here we are not taking into consideration the emissions over the entire product life cycles. Alright, that is, product life cycle means pollution produced during its manufacturing or after decommissioning of the DG system. So this is another benefit. Then coming into one more benefit, with some technologies like solar technology, wind energy technology, it is also considered as a form of renewable energy, and it can increase the power reliability as a backup or standby power to customers. Therefore, it offers a customer a choice in meeting their energy needs. So this is the one more added benefit of distributed generation system. Then what are the challenges associated with the distributed generation system? Though there are a lot of benefits, still there are challenges which are associated with distributed generation systems, what are the challenges? See, there are no uniform national interconnection standard addressing safety, power, quality and reliability for small distributed generated systems. Still, at present, there is no, we can say, uniform national interconnection standards which addresses the safety norms, which addresses the power quality and which addresses the reliability for such distributed generation system. Still, the current process for interconnection is not standardized among provinces. Still, standardization of these particular things has not started still in many of the areas. Then interconnection may also involve communication with several different organizations. The environmental regulations and permit process that have been developed for larger distributed generation projects make some DG projects uneconomical. So what is the problem? There are many environmental regulations also, and there are a lot of permits that has to be taken for larger DG systems, which makes the some of the DG projects uneconomical. Contractual barriers are also there, such as liability insurance requirement, fees and the charges, and also there are a lot of extensive paperwork involved. So these are all the challenges associated with distributed generation systems. So this was all the content related to energy efficiency, energy conservation, and this is our today's lecture. Now we will discuss the multiple choice questions. Now students, based on today's video lecture, let's discuss some multiple choice question in order to assess the learning that we have gained from today's lecture. So our multiple choice question number 1, let's read out this multiple choice question. So the multiple choice question number 1 says that based on usability, energy resources are classified into, so based on usability, the energy resources are classified into, first option is primary, secondary and tertiary resources. Second is option B, primary and secondary resources. Option C is primary, secondary, intermediate and tertiary resources, and the option D is primary, intermediate and secondary resources. So as we all know, we have studied just now that based on usability, the renewable sources are classified into primary and secondary resources. Alright, so but apart from these, if we consider usability, then we can also consider the intermediate sources also. So there is a confusion, you can get confused here that whether option B is correct or option D is correct. So since we all know that on the basis of usability, primary, intermediate and secondary resources is the classification. Primary resources are present in nature prior to human interference or modification. Intermediate resources are obtained from primary resources after one or more stages of transformation, while secondary resources are the form of energy that is finally supplied to the consumer for utilization. So you can now understand that option D is the correct option. So it is a bit tricky multiple choice question, so always keep in mind that based on usability, the energy sources are classified into primary, intermediate and secondary resources. Now coming into multiple choice question number 2. Now let's read out the second question. Which of the following is not a type of a primary resource? Which of the following is not a type of primary resource? Option A is crude oil, option B is coal, option C is hydrogen energy, and option D is sunlight. So in all the four options you can see that crude oil coal, and you can say sunlight. These three, though these are replenished after a very long time, crude oil and coal, but they are considered as primary source. Even sunlight is also considered as primary source. The only one which is not considered as a primary source is the hydrogen energy. Why? What is the reason? Option C is the correct option, but the reason is that hydrogen is mainly obtained from fossil fuels, which are primary sources of energy. Therefore, hydrogen energy is a secondary source of energy. Alright, crude oil, coal, sunlight, they are primary source of energy since they can be directly obtained from nature. So therefore, C, that is hydrogen energy, is only the one among these four which is not a type of primary source. So this was our second multiple choice question. Coming into the third one, our third multiple choice question says that the ratio of energy received from a raw energy source to energy spent to obtain the raw energy source is known as, see, the energy received from raw energy source means the primary source, and the energy spent in converting this source into a secondary or intermediate source. So that ratio between these energy, they want the name of that particular ratio. So the ratio we all know is known as the energy yield ratio. Since option A is consumption ratio, no, this is not the correct answer. Fuel ratio, not the correct answer. Joule ratio, no, it is not the name either. So option C is the correct option. Alright, the ratio of energy provided by a system, for example wind energy conversion systems, over its lifetime to the energy required to make it is called as energy yield ratio. So this was the name given to this ratio. So option C is the correct option. Coming into the next multiple choice question, students, our next question is renewable energy, means this is our multiple choice question number 4. Renewable energy which are being used for many decades are known as, so for many decades the renewable energy source that was used is named as, our option A is conventional energy source, B is non-conventional energy source, C primary energy source, and D is fuel cell. So we all know that conventionally, traditionally, the fuel which we were using for many decades is known as the conventional energy sources. So the option A, conventional energy source, is the answer. Explanation is that conventional sources of energy are those sources that are being used traditionally for a long time, that is coal, petroleum, firewood, etc. Non-conventional sources are relatively new in terms of utilization. Alright, so now moving this option, this MCQ number 4 is also clear to you now. Coming into multiple choice question number 5, sorry. So 5, the question is saying you that a new renewable energy system is designed to harvest energy from wind. The total energy required to build the system is 240 kilojoule. The energy yield ratio of the system is 14:3. The total energy provided by the system over its lifetime is, so as I have already told you, the energy yield ratio is given by ES, that is your energy supplied by the system over its lifetime, and divided by energy required to build the system, ER. So ES divided by ER will give you the energy yield ratio, which is given to us as 14/3. So if we keep this value and we also keep the value of ER, which is 240, then what we will get? We will get the value of ES equal to 240 into 14 by 3, which will give you the value equal to 1120, and 1120 kilojoule is the value which is given as option C in our options list. Alright, so this was our multiple choice question number 5. I hope this question is understood by you, because see, energy yield ratio is nothing but it is the ratio of energy supplied by the system over its lifetime divided by energy that was required to build the system. So in this way, the two values among the three values in this equation were given to you, and therefore it was easy to calculate it. Then after, students, moving into the next multiple choice question, that is multiple choice question number 6. Which of the following statement is correct about solar energy? So let's read out all the statements. Statement number A, solar energy is renewable and conventional sources of energy. So it is renewable, but it is not a conventional sources of energy, so we can discard this option A. Coming into option B, solar energy is a non-renewable and non-conventional sources of energy. So again, non-renewable, no, it is a renewable source of energy. Third, option C, solar energy is a renewable and non-conventional sources of energy. Now this sounds as correct because solar energy comes under non-conventional sources of energy, and D is nothing but it is solar energy is a non-renewable source of energy, so it is not a complete answer. So this is also wrong. So option C is giving you the correct answer, and the explanation is that solar energy is a source of energy that has not been traditionally used and is relatively new in terms of usage. Hence, it is a non-conventional source of energy. It is unlimited and inexhaustible, and hence it is a renewable source of energy. So don't get confused, students. Always keep this in mind in the option whenever there is asked a question that solar energy is what. So you always take the answer. Solar energy is a renewable source of energy and it is a non-conventional source of energy. So now moving into the next one, this was our multiple choice question number 6. Moving into the next multiple choice question number 7. Let's read out this question. Wind and hydrogen energy are examples of, so wind and hydrogen energy are examples of, let's read out the options. First is primary sources, second primary and secondary sources, third C option is secondary sources, and D option is tertiary sources. So see, wind and hydrogen energy, they both are also primary sources, and they are also wind is a primary source, we all know, but hydrogen energy, it is considered as a secondary source because generally we harness this hydrogen energy from the fossil fuels. Therefore it is considered as a secondary source. So this B option, which is saying that wind energy is a primary source and hydrogen energy is a secondary source, is giving you the correct answer. So B is the correct answer, and the explanation is what? Wind energy is directly available in the environment, so it is a primary energy source, while hydrogen energy obtained from fossil fuels, so it is a secondary energy source. So this MCQ number 7 is also completed. Coming into the next MCQ, multiple choice question number 8. On the basis of long-term availability, resources are classified into, so let's read out the options. First is conventional, option A is conventional and non-conventional resources. Alright, so on the basis of long-term availability, we don't name the energy sources as conventional or non-conventional. Second is renewable and non-renewable sources. Now see, renewable and non-renewable on the basis of long term means the availability, on the basis of availability of the source, we name the energy source as a renewable or non-renewable energy sources. So B is the correct answer. Let's read out the other. If There is any other probable answer? C is primary and secondary sources. No. D is the commercial and non-commercial sources. So we can see that B is the correct answer. Explanation is, on the basis of traditional use, resources are classified into conventional and non-conventional resources. Then on the basis of long-term availability, resources are classified into renewable and non-renewable sources. And based on usability, resources are classified into primary, intermediate and secondary resources. Alright. Then on the basis of commercial applications, resources are classified into commercial and non-commercial resources. Now moving into the 9th multiple choice question, let's read this multiple choice question. Which of the energy resources are widely used in industries? So let's read out the options. Option A is gasoline and coal, B is wood, C is biogas and D is crop residue. So among these, we all know at present too much dependence of the industry is on coal and gasoline. So they are widely used, we all know, coal and petrol. So option A is the correct answer. Explanation is what? Coal and gasoline are commercial resources that are widely used in industries such as steel, cement and electricity. Then after, firewood and crop residues are generally used for domestic purposes. Biogas has some industrial uses such as for electricity generation, but it is not widely used. So this was our multiple choice question number 9. Then after, coming into the last multiple choice question. What is the last multiple choice question? Let's read out. This is our 10th multiple choice question. Which of these resources does not produce CO2 during electricity generation? This means that which is considered as a clean fuel for electricity generation. We all know coal produces a lot of pollution, as we have seen that thermal power plants generate a lot of effluents which are thrown into the atmosphere. So coal, option A, can't be the answer. Option B, methane, it also produces pollutants, it can't be the answer. Biogas on the combustion can also produce pollutant, but uranium, which is a nuclear fuel, it does not generate any CO2, carbon dioxide. So C, uranium, is the correct answer. And the explanation is what? Explanation is coal, methane and biogas produce carbon dioxide during electricity generation, as all of them have some carbon content which on combustion produces CO2. Now uranium produces energy by the process of nuclear fission, and therefore there is no generation of carbon dioxide. So I hope this multiple choice question is also understood to you. So all the multiple choice questions, students, we have discussed. Now for your self-study, you can use some reference books which are displayed here on the slide. These are all very good books. Like first is Non-Conventional Energy Sources by G.D. Rai. It is of Khanna Publications. Then Non-Conventional Energy Sources by R.K. Rajput, S. Chand Publication. Then you have Renewable Energy Sources by Tweddle, J.W. and Wire, foreign publication. Then you have Non-Conventional Energy Sources by B.H. Khan. It is of Tata McGraw-Hill Publication. So you can refer all these books. So for today, it's enough. We will again meet in our next video lecture and discuss more on the topic of renewable energy technology. So thank you, students. Thank you and have a nice day.